The Kansas state capitol buzzed with the quiet hum of anticipation. The room was filled with murmurs, the clink of pens against paper, and the shuffle of notes. A congressional hearing had gone on for hours, and the tension in the air was thick. It was the third hour of the Education Policy Subcommittee meeting, and tempers were rising. The dry air seemed to carry the weight of countless words exchanged, many of which had started to feel personal. The atmosphere was electric, charged with the kind of unease that comes only when the conversation feels like it might unravel at any moment. Jasmine Crockett, sitting tall in a navy blue blazer, had been reserved, quietly listening to the back and forth. This was her style, calm, deliberate. She always waited for the right moment. Across from her sat Caroline Levitt, the sharp-tongued aide to a senior political figure who now seemed irritated by the challenge from Jasmine, a confident black woman whose presence commanded respect. Caroline's posture was rigid, defensive, a sign that she had been worn thin by the extended discussion. Caroline, flustered, crossed her arms. "Standards need to be enforced," she said defensively. Jasmine didn't flinch. Her voice remained steady and firm. "So, you're suggesting that schools in underserved districts simply aren't trying hard enough?" Caroline's expression hardened. She was used to debating, but never with someone like Jasmine, whose quiet intensity carried more weight than most people's loud arguments. The conversation escalated, with Caroline pushing the idea of rigid standards. But Jasmine, ever thoughtful, shot back, "We can't talk about fairness without addressing access. Context matters. So does history." Caroline scoffed quietly, unaware that the mic was still on. The next word slipped out, harsh and unmistakable. She should just go back to Africa. A stunned silence filled the room. The sound reverberated throughout the chamber as people started to shift in their seats. A young black intern in the back of the room stiffened. His eyes flicked towards Caroline, who had just made a comment that could only be described as deeply offensive. The moment was captured live on C-SPAN, and the footage would soon spread like wildfire. Jasmine, however, didn't rise to the bait. She simply looked at Caroline, her hands calmly folded in front of her. Her expression wasn't one of anger, but of quiet resolve, a look that said, "You think you've hurt me, but all you've done is show the world who you are." Jasmine didn't speak. She didn't need to. The room remained tense, with the committee chair quickly attempting to steer the conversation back to the agenda. But Caroline, visibly shaken, took a sip from her water bottle, avoiding eye contact. It was already too late. Outside, the video of her comment was being shared, analyzed, and captioned. It didn't take long before the phrase "go back to Africa" began trending across social media. The damage had been done. Caroline's words were now etched in the public's mind. Back in the hallway, Jasmine's colleagues waited for her response. But Jasmine chose not to speak right away. Her quiet demeanor made her response all the more powerful. She wasn't going to give the public what they expected. She wasn't going to give them the spectacle they so often craved. Instead, she simply watched, observed, and waited. The press conference the following morning was a spectacle. At 10 a.m., Jasmine stepped up to the podium, alone, with a black folder in hand. The cameras clicked as she prepared to address the nation. She opened the folder, glanced at it briefly, and then closed it, choosing not to read the prepared statement. Instead, she spoke plainly. "What happened yesterday wasn't new to me." Her voice was calm, not a hint of anger. "I've been told to go back since I was a teenager." Jasmine's words cut through the tension. The room was silent, everyone hanging on her every word. The weight of her statement wasn't lost on anyone. She was speaking from experience, from a place that many people couldn't even begin to understand. She went on, explaining how she had heard such comments throughout her life, even in boardrooms, though more politely phrased. What shocked her, she said, was not the words themselves, but the idea that some people still believed this was an isolated incident, a one-off occurrence. "I'm not shocked," she said, pausing. What shocked me was that some people thought I should be shocked. The quiet strength in her voice made those words resonate even more. Her message was clear. When you tell someone to go back, you're not questioning their citizenship. You're questioning their belonging, their value, their place at the table. Her words were not just about the comment Caroline made. They were a call to confront the larger issues of race, identity, and the historical injustices that still plague society. The speech quickly went viral, shared across social media platforms, debated in living rooms, barbershops, and classrooms. It was not just a political statement, it was a call to rethink what it meant to belong in this country. People from all walks of life, from truck drivers in Wichita to teachers in Flagstaff, Arizona, discussed her words. It was a moment of collective reflection, a moment that forced many to examine their assumptions about who had the right to claim space in this country. In one diner in Toledo, Ohio, an older man, a regular at the booth, said, "I didn't even know her name before this. But now, that woman's got steel in her spine." His words reflected the sentiments of so many others who felt the power of Jasmine's calm response, her measured grace in the face of blatant disrespect. Meanwhile, Caroline was grappling with the fallout. Her aides scrambled to release a statement claiming the comments were misheard due to background noise. But the public wasn't buying it. People demanded more than apologies. They demanded accountability. They wanted to see Caroline confront the ugly truth of her words, not hide behind excuses. In the following days, Caroline found herself in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. As her team struggled to contain the damage, Caroline came to a difficult realization. Her words had caught the public's attention in ways she hadn't anticipated. She spent her nights watching the clips, knowing that there was no easy way out of this. She couldn't undo the damage. All she could do now was figure out how to move forward. After the media frenzy, Jasmine quietly returned to her hotel, surrounded by the love and support of her family. Her mother, sitting beside her, asked if she was going to say something. Jasmine simply responded, "Yeah, but it won't be what they're expecting." She wasn't looking for sympathy or a dramatic retort. She had already said everything she needed to say. Caroline struggled to regain control of her narrative continued, but for Jasmine, the moment wasn't about gaining fame. It was about using her voice, not for headlines, but for lasting change. She had already made her mark. Months passed, and the noise around the incident eventually faded from the headlines. Yet, in small corners of America, the conversation continued. In a classroom in Charleston, South Carolina, a civics teacher began her semester by showing Jasmine's press conference and asking, "What does it mean to belong?" The question lingered in the room, forcing the students to think about their place in the world and the right they all had to occupy space without question. Jasmine's speech had reached people in ways few political moments ever did. It was the kind of moment that wasn't about shouting or theatrics, but about speaking truth calmly, standing firm when the world expected you to break. It wasn't just a moment for the people who heard it in the chamber. It was a moment for everyone who had ever been made to feel like they didn't belong. Her words had settled in the hearts of many. And as for Caroline, she spent months quietly working behind the scenes, listening, learning, and evolving, away from the spotlight, away from the stage. She knew the conversation was bigger than her. This was no longer about a comment made in haste. It was about something far more complex. In a diner outside of Toledo, Ohio, a regular leaned over his coffee cup and remarked, "I didn't even know her name before this. But now, that woman's got steel in her spine." He wasn't the only one who had noticed. In Flagstaff, Arizona, a Navajo teacher paused her lesson and showed her students the video. "That's how you carry yourself when they try to cut you down," she told them. She was teaching them more than just history or math. She was teaching them the power of quiet dignity in the face of adversity. But for Jasmine, the weight of the moment was also felt in solitude. She sat in her apartment, reflecting on everything that had transpired. Her phone buzzed with messages, but she didn't turn on the news. She didn't need to hear the commentary from those who didn't know the depth of what she had lived. She had already said everything she needed to say, and now it was time for others to listen. A message from Senator Leah Drummond of Texas appeared on her screen. That was powerful. Would you meet? Jasmine paused. In that moment, the world seemed heavier than it ever had. People who had never given her the time of day now wanted to engage with her, to understand her perspective. It was a strange moment of realization for Jasmine. The world was listening, but one person still hadn't spoken. And when she did, it would change everything. Caroline Levitt sat alone in her room, reflecting on the weight of her actions. Her team had already issued multiple statements, but the public's response had been unrelenting. Her assistant Brian had watched her struggle, knowing there was no way to spin her way out of this. She had crossed a line, and the consequences were severe. Jasmine's moment had taken on a life of its own, and Caroline was beginning to realize she was no longer in control of the narrative. Jasmine's speech didn't just become a viral clip. It became a conversation about belonging, identity, and how we treat each other when the cameras are rolling. And in the quiet moments afterward, when the noise of politics died down, people were still reflecting on the choice Jasmine made, not to respond with anger, but with truth. The story didn't end with a scandal or a victory lap. It ended with a simple truth that would last far longer than any headline. Sometimes, strength doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be true.